Hello dear learners, welcome to this SWAYAM NPTEL online course on inclusive education. I am Dr. Umakant Prasad, an assistant professor from Department of Education, Vinaya Bhavan, Vishwabharati Shanti Niketan. This is week 2 and today we are going to discuss lecture number 8, that is global perspective of special education. During this lecture, we will cover development of special education, especially pioneering categories in special education, that is special education for hearing impairment, special education for visual impairment and special education for mentally retarded children, that is intellectually disabled children. Special education is a tailored instructional approach designed to meet the unique needs of students with disabilities, ensuring they receive equitable access to education and opportunities for their all-round development. Its journey reflects evolving societal attitudes, legal mandates and educational practices aimed at inclusivity and equal rights. Historically, individuals with disabilities were often marginalized with limited or no access to formal education. Many were placed in institutions of asylum, reflecting societal beliefs that they were incapable of learning. This period was characterized by exclusion and a lack of educational provisions for those with disabilities. The journey of special education began with a significant shift in societal attitudes towards persons with disabilities during the Renaissance and Enlightenment periods. These eras emphasized human dignity, capacity for growth and education for all, including individuals with disabilities. The Renaissance began in Italy during 16th century, marked the first genuine shift in recognizing the potential of persons with disabilities. It laid the foundation for the development of special education as a structured field. This momentum continued with Enlightenment movement in 18th century with intellectuals like Rousseau, Condillac, Diderot advocating the idea that individuals with disabilities could learn and be educated. In 19th and early 20th centuries, many special institutions were established for the purpose of educating individuals with specific disabilities. For instance, schools for the hearing impaired and visual impaired individuals were founded, providing a structured education tailored to these populations. However, these institutions often operated separately from mainstream education, reinforcing segregation. The recognition that children with disabilities required specialized educational settings for their growth and adjustment led to the rise of special schools across Europe, USA and Canada. The rationale for these segregated settings included specialized needs. The rationale for segregating disabled children into special schools stemmed from a belief that children with disabilities required specialized teaching methods, curriculum and resources that were not readily available in general education settings. Social segregation. The establishment of separate schools, often with a focus on specific disabilities like blindness or deafness, were seen as a way to protect mainstream students from being distracted or burdened by the presence of students with disabilities. Some educators feared that including disabled students in mainstream schools would negatively impact the academic progress and social well-being of non-disabled students. Hence, segregated schools were established to maintain the existing educational system without disrupting its structure and standards for all students. Pioneering categories in special education. Early special education efforts largely focused on hearing impairments, visual impairments and intellectual disabilities, that is earlier referred as mental retardation students. These three categories were considered prominent due to the observable and significant challenges they posed for individuals across to education and daily life. These early categorization not only helped to formalize special education, but also influenced global policy, teacher training and curriculum development aimed at meeting the unique needs of exceptional learners. Special education for hearing impaired students. The first documented efforts to educate deaf children began in Spain by the effort of Pedro Ponce de Leon. He was a Spanish monk who is credited with pioneering methods for teaching deaf individuals to speak and write, making him an important figure in the history of deaf education. While some historical accounts credit Ponce with being the first person to educate the deaf, others claim he was the first to teach deaf individuals to speak and write specifically. His methods focused on oral communication, focusing on developing speech and literacy skills. His work inspired others, leading to the establishment of small-scale schools throughout Europe. Juan Pablo Bonet, he is considered a pioneer in deaf education, particularly for his work in developing methods for teaching deaf people to speak and communicate. He published a book titled Reduction of Letters of the Alphabet and Methods of Teaching Deaf Mutes to Speak in 1620, which is considered the first book on deaf education. Bonet's work laid the groundwork for development of deaf education and helped to establish the importance of communication for deaf individuals. His book provided a structured approach to teaching deaf people, combining visual and manual methods with articulation exercise. Thomas Braidwood was the pioneering Scottish educator who significantly advanced deaf education in Britain. In 1760, he established Braidwood's Academy for the Deaf and Dumb in Edinburgh, recognized as the first school for deaf children in Britain. This institution marked a transformative shift from the prevailing neglect of deaf individuals to a structured educational approach. Braidwood developed a combined system of instruction that integrated sign language, articulation, speech and lip reading. This approach created the foundation for British Sign Language, which became official in 2003. Samuel Haneke, he is known for emphasizing lip reading and speaking in his teaching methods for the deaf. He believed that oral communication through lip reading and speech was crucial for intellectual development and integration of deaf individuals into society. Haneke primarily used speech and hearing in his teaching, though he included a type of manual alphabet. Haneke's instructional approach emphasized speech and lip reading. He taught speech by having students feel the throat to understand vocal vibrations and utilize lip reading to facilitate communication. He believed that having access to spoken language was crucial to development of the thought process. He is also known as the father of deaf and is credited with developing the world's first sign alphabet and a systematic method of teaching the hearing impaired. The school established by him is widely recognized as a landmark in deaf education because it was one of the first schools to use sign language as primary method of instruction, later known as the manual method. Ambroise Siard was a prominent French educator and a key figure in the history of deaf education. He significantly contributed to the development and refinement of manual communication methods, particularly French Sign Language. Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet in 1817 established the first permanent school for the deaf in United States, which is known as the American School for the Deaf. Gallaudet wrote the child's picture defining and reading book in 1830, which was used to teach young deaf children at the school and aimed to help all children learning to read. Alexander Graham Bell and Helen Keller significantly advanced deaf education by promoting oral methods and developing technologies like hearing aids. Bell, a teacher of deaf, advocated for lip reading and speaking over sign language, believing it was crucial for deaf individuals' social integration and success. Educators in deaf education are generally divided into two main categories based on their educational philosophy and communication methods. Oralists, oral approach educators, emphasized spoken language, that is speech and lip reading, and auditory training by using hearing aids, cochlear implants and other assistive learning devices, etc. It was a dominant method, particularly in the 19th and early 20th centuries, with figures like Alexander Graham Bell advocating for its use. They believed that teaching deaf individuals to speak and lip reading would improve their social integration and opportunities. However, this approach has been criticized for potentially limited language development and for its historical suppression of sign language, which has had significant cultural impact on the deaf community. Manualism is a philosophy in deaf education that emphasizes the use of sign language, finger spelling and gestures as a primary communication tools rather than speech and lip reading. It advocates of manualism, often called manualists, believe that sign language is a natural and effective language for deaf people to learn and use. Manualists often see deafness as a cultural identity, not a disability. They emphasize the value of deaf culture and sign language. Manualists focus on ensuring full access to language and education through sign language, prioritizing communication over conformity to hearing norms. The 1880 Milan Conference, a major event in deaf education history, officially promoted the oral method and discouraged sign language, leading to decades of oral dominance. Over the time, the deaf community pushed back, emphasizing the success of sign language in fostering language development and identity, strengthening the manualist approach. The long-standing debate between manualists, sign language advocates and oralists, speech-focused advocates in deaf education indeed contributed to the development of total communication approach. This approach emerged as a way to integrate various communication methods including sign language, speech, lip reading and written language to cater to the diverse needs of deaf individuals. Thus, over the time, the intense debate between manualists, that is sign language advocates, and oralists, that is speech focused advocates, gave rise to the total communication approach, that is a blend of both methods adopted widely in 1970s onwards. Special education for the visual impairment. Valentine Oué was the French philanthropist and pioneer in the field of education for the blind people. In 1784, he founded the first school for the blind known as Institution for Blind Youth in Paris. This was the first time when blind individuals were given access to formal education, and it marked a major milestone in the history of disability rights and inclusive education. He believed that blind individuals could be educated just like sighted people, and he proved it by teaching a blind boy, Francis Lesassier, to read using embossed letters. His school eventually became a model for similar institutions around the world and played a critical role in the development of systems like Braille, which was invented later by Louis Braille, himself a student of Weiss School. A pivotal advancement came with Louis Braille, who lost his sight at the age of 3, developed the Braille system in 1824 when he was just 15 years old. His system used raised dots arranged in cells of up to 6 dots, which allowed users to read and write through touch. Each cell represents a letter, number, punctuation marks, or even musical notations. He used Barbieri's system as a starting point and cut its 12 dots configuration in half. The system was first published in 1829. A more complete elaboration appeared in 1837. Key benefits of Braille in education. The first benefit of Braille is independence. Braille enabled blind individuals to read and write independently, opening doors to self-education and intellectual engagement, academic success and personal growth. Access to literature. Braille ensures visually impaired students can access the same curriculum, textbook and materials as their sighted peer. Books could now be printed in Braille, making information more accessible to the blind. Literacy and employment. Blind people could pursue education and professional careers more easily, improving their quality of life. Inclusivity and social participation. Braille education promotes inclusivity by enabling visually impaired individuals to participate fully in educational settings and social activities. Global impact. Braille became a universal system adapted into many languages worldwide. It provides a direct, tactile way to read and write, fostering better retention, comprehension and language skills, and empowers visually impaired students to achieve literacy, independence and access to full education. Braille system remains the foundation of tactile literacy today and continues to be a critical tool for inclusion and accessibility. In 1791, Edward Ruston, a British poet, evolutionist and humanitarian who had become blind himself, founded the first school for the blind in UK in Liverpool. It was known as Liverpool School for the Indigent Blind. This pioneering institution aimed to provide education and vocational training for blind individuals who were otherwise often marginalized. It became a model for future institutions supporting the education of the blind. In 1829, Samuel Gridley Howe, along with his friend John Dix Fisher, founded the Parkinson School for the Blind in Boston. It was the first school for the blind in the United States for educating blind students and training future educators. Howe became the first director of the school in 1832 and played a significant role in its development. The Parkinson School for the Blind continues to be a leading institution for the education and support of individuals with visual and other disabilities, and its mission to promote inclusive education reaches globally. Annie Sullivan, a graduate of the Parkinson School for the Blind, famously taught Helen Keller, a deaf-blind child who became a famous example of never giving up and fighting for others. Annie Sullivan and Helen Keller made profound contributions to the education and empowerment of blind and deaf-blind individuals. Annie Sullivan's contributions. Annie Sullivan developed groundbreaking techniques for teaching Helen Keller, including the manual alphabet, tactile sign language, and experiential learning. Her personalized, patient, and hands-on approach became a model for educating children with disabilities, especially children with deafblind. By successfully teaching Helen Keller, Sullivan proved that children with severe disabilities could learn and thrive. Her work helped shift public perception from hopelessness to potential, influencing the development of special education programs. Helen Keller's contributions. Helen Keller became the first deaf-blind person to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree. Her academic success inspired the creation of more accessible education for people with disabilities. Keller used her platform to advocate for the rights of the blind and disabled. She gave lectures, wrote books, and worked with organizations like the American Foundation for the Blind, promoting education and empowerment opportunity for people with visual impairment. Through her writing and travels, Keller helped shape policies and attitudes around the world, encouraging governments and institutions to invest in inclusive education and rehabilitation services for the blind. Technological advancements in later years, such as Snellen chart, which standardized the measurement of visual acuity, marked a significant step forward in enabling more precise diagnosis and treatment of vision problems. Before Snellen chart, there was no uniform way to measure visual acuity. Different practitioners used different charts, making it difficult to compare results and track progress over time. Snellen chart provided a more objective measurement of visual acuity, moving away from purely subjective assessment. The Snellen chart made it possible to detect vision problems earlier, leading to earlier intervention and treatment. Technological advancement in later years, such as Parkinson Braille, talking books, and screen readers, significantly improved access to education for individuals with blindness who are visually impaired, empowering greater independence and participation in academic and professional settings. Special education for mental retardation, that is now called as intellectual disability. Efforts to educate intellectual disabled children began with the work of Jean-Marc Etard. He was a French physician best known for his significant work in the education of individuals with disabilities, especially in case of Victor of Éberon, a wild child found in the forest of France in late 18th century. Etard strongly believed that mental retardation was not necessarily innate or permanent and that education and environment could significantly improve functioning. This was a revolutionary idea at the time when many viewed such individuals as uneducable. His work laid the foundation for special education and had a lasting impact on education method for individuals with sensory and intellectual impairments. Edward Seguin. He was a French physician and educator who built upon the work of Jean-Marc Etard. He is widely recognized for developing a systematic and holistic method, that is the Seguin method, for educating children with intellectual disabilities. His approach focused on nurturing motor, intellectual and social skill, a major change from just caring of people to actually educating them. He is widely regarded as the father of special education because of his groundbreaking work in educating individuals with intellectual disabilities. His work challenged the prevailing belief that individuals with intellectual disabilities were incapable of learning and contributed to the significant changes in both educational practices and societal perceptions of these individuals. Maria Montessori, an Italian physician and educator, made significant contributions to the education of children with mental retardation. Her early work laid the foundation for the Montessori method, which is widely used today for both general and special education as well. She studied the works of Itard and Seguin and was influenced by their beliefs that education could improve the lives of children with cognitive impairments. She applied hands-on, sensory-based methods to help these children develop attention, coordination and basic academic skills. Montessori's work helped shift thinking from custodial care to active education for children with intellectual disabilities. Ovidiu Dracula, a Belgian physician, psychologist and educator, played a pioneering role in the early 20th century by redefining mental retardation as primarily an educational issue rather than merely a medical condition. He believed that children with intellectual disabilities were educable and that their learning potential could be unlocked through appropriate pedagogy, not just clinical treatment. In 1848, Samuel Gridley Owe and Edward Seguin played key roles in establishing Massachusetts Experimental School for Feeble-Minded Children, which was a landmark in the development of special education in United States. It represented a significant step towards providing educational and supportive services for individuals with intellectual disabilities. Later developments included the Visual Training School, which produced the Vineland Social Maturity Scale, a pioneering tool for assessing adaptive behavior. The scale laid down the groundwork for modern adaptive behavior assessments used to diagnose the intellectual and developmental disabilities. Neglected categories and emerging awareness. While significant progress was made for certain disability groups, particularly those with intellectual disabilities, other groups were often overlooked during the early stages of special education development. Children with emotional disturbances, learning disabilities and autism were typically excluded from educational reforms and misunderstood in both medical and educational contexts. These groups were often lumped under psychiatric or behavioral labels, focusing more on treatment than education due to lack of proper identification tools, social stigma, misconceptions about their educational potential and educational system limitations. Now, we can conclude that the era of segregated special schools marked as a significant phase in the global history of special education, spanning much of the 19th and early 20th centuries. During this period, children with disabilities were often removed from mainstream society and placed in separate residential or day schools designed specifically for their impairments. Segregation, though initially seen as a protective or remedial measure, reinforced social exclusion and limited opportunities for integration. Despite their limitations, these schools played a foundation role in developing specialized teaching methods and raising awareness about disability, eventually promoting global discourse on inclusive and rights of persons with disabilities. There are some references here. Thank you.